Today I'll be reading from Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 12, Proverbs chapter 22, verse 7, and Luke chapter 12, verse 15. Now the Lord said to Abram, I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. The lover of money will not be satisfied with money, nor the lover of wealth with gain. Those who are generous are blessed, for they share their bread with the poor. Be on your guard against all kind of greed, for one's life cannot be consistent in the abundance of possessions. The word of God for the people of God.
So can you guess what we're talking about today? Join me in prayer. God, as we share in this message this morning, we ask that you would open our hearts and our minds and our spirits, that you would speak to us, that you would renew us and make us new people. Send us back into the world inspired. We ask I also ask, oh God, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing to you, O Lord. Amen. Well, there's a story that goes that the church council met, and that they met to determine the pastor's compensation for the coming year. And after the meeting, the chair had this one-on-one meeting with the pastor, and the chair said, we're really sorry, Pastor, but we've decided that we can not only not give you a raise, but we really need to cut your salary. And the pastor protested, what do you mean? You can't cut my salary. I really also need a raise. I am but a poor preacher. And the council chair said, I know, we hear you every Sunday. Where are you, Bob? You don't say that, do you? You don't say that? That's a terrible joke, isn't it? But it is today. We're going to talk about something that often nobody wants to talk about in church. I think it's about as bad as politics these days. We're going to talk about money. And it is in the middle of stewardship. Over the past 4 weeks, I've been looking at, if you take the scriptures and you boil the scriptures down to just five messages, 5 themes. And if we take each theme each week and we live them to their fullest, we will find a life that really is life. Jesus says, I come so that you will have life and have it abundantly. And these 5 messages, these 5 themes, give us a sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. Today we're going to talk about generosity. It's something that is through all of our scriptures. If you heard the scripture that Dana read, the 5 scriptures she read, it starts in Genesis, and it makes it all the way through the Gospels and the letters. And we're going to talk about generosity, not only of our finances, but generosity of spirit. I was talking to Jane before the service, and I was just thinking, if we have this posture in our lives that we are loved, that we are God's beloved, that we matter, that we have purpose. If we come to know those things, what will flow from our hearts, from our lips, from our lives will be generosity. And if we're looking for life that really is life, we have to get this message. We have to choose a life of generosity. So first we're going to talk about generosity of spirit. Generosity of spirit is this idea that we give freely, we give readily, even when someone may not be deserving of it. We use the word graciousness or grace often to describe that, this sense that even if someone doesn't deserve that kindness, that care, we're going to do it anyway. Every time I do a wedding, I will talk to the bride and groom about how important it is not to think of themselves as giving 50%, but if they always give about 80%, each of them, that means they're going to be well far ahead in how they care for each other. I think in my own family, I find myself, confession time, frustrated with my 3 boys. Anyone else as a parent find themselves frustrated? All right, no lying. And I'm always humbled because my oldest son, who I'm always the most frustrated with, is always so generous back. It's okay, Mom. I know you've had a long day. It's okay. I know that I could have put my dish, I can go on, and I could have cleaned my room. I could have, and I'm just, my posture changes when I meet him with a generosity of spirit. Who in your life models that for you? Do you have a generosity of spirit? This week, as I was going through the week, I was aware when I didn't. And I would stop and ask God, help me, oh God, to have a generosity of spirit toward others. I know when people meet you in that place, it changes them as much as it changes you. And another part of generosity of spirit isn't just offering it to others, but it's being able to stop and recognize when it happens to you. So when my oldest son does that, the next step for me is to go to him and say, thank you. I appreciate you. Do you find those people in your lives who, when they are generous in spirit, do you thank them? Do you offer them a sense of appreciation to let them know how much it means to you? Because when we express gratitude as a regular part of our lives, it turns our posture back to God and to generosity. So the thing we see in true wealth is that generosity comes from a deep spiritual life. People have more friends, more meaning, they say in research, when they live a posture of generosity of spirit. The second is this idea of generosity with our finances. And so we have to ask ourselves, what is our relationship with money? How do we see it as it relates to a sense of generosity? And right now, my oldest son is a senior, my middle son is a junior. So right now, if you can imagine, college is on our mind. Anyone else? College is like right there. Or maybe you have kids in college right now, and it is on my mind. And I heard a story told where there was this pastor, and he was with a young man, and he was finishing his high school year, and he was a senior. And so the pastor said, what do you want to do, and what are your plans and dreams? And the boy said, well, I want to go to a really good school. I've worked really hard in high school, and so I just want to get accepted. I've turned in early admission. I think I'm going to get accepted to a really good school. He said, okay, and what else? What after that? And he said, well, after college, I want to go to grad school and do really well in grad school. And he said, great, what after that? And he said, well, after that, I want to work for a really good company. I just want a decent salary and do really well. Great, sounds like a good plan. What about after that? And he said, well, after that, I want to get married and have a family. And great, son, what after that? And he said, well, if I'm honest, I really want to buy a 7 Series BMW and I really want a nice house, and awesome, and great dreams. What after that? And well, he's sort of getting stumped, and he says, well, I guess I want to retire early if I have enough money, and I want to travel the world with my wife, and I think that's sort of it at that point. And the pastor said, son, your dreams are way too small. Because he said every time you reach that goal, if you're trying to find meaning and wealth and money and that BMW 7 Series, although the pastor did say that may last longer than other things when it comes to joy, but he said if that's where you're going to try to find meaning and purpose in your life, you're never going to be satisfied. Meaning and purpose comes from this sense of giving giving of our time, giving of our resources. You know what St. Francis of Assisi says? It is in giving that we receive. And they did this study called the generosity paradox, and they found that the more people gave, the more fulfilled they were in their lives. They said the more generous people are, the more happiness, health, and purpose in life that they enjoy. There's a great book in our Bible that's called Ecclesiastes. And it's a book they believe was written by Solomon, King Solomon. If you go back in history, any of those who are history buffs, and you study King Solomon, he had it all. He had palaces. Apparently, he had 1,000 horses. Now that, as you know, as a horse lover, that's something I could deal with. 1,000 horses, maybe not, but anyway. But he had it all. And he finds himself at the end of his life with no meaning and no purpose and no sense of abundant life. And he writes this book, and quite frankly, anybody who's studied it, it's a depressing book. In fact, maybe I would say not necessarily depressing, but meaningful, because it tells us what it means to focus on money and not true wealth. The lover of money will not be satisfied with money, he's saying, at the end of his life, because he focused on loving money. The lover of money will not be satisfied with money, nor the lover of wealth with gain. And so we hear this message because it's not until the very last few lines of this book, where he makes it all the way through, that he realized he missed the purpose of life altogether. This purpose to be generous, to offer love and grace and kindness. That's where we find purpose in life. There's a great story on that was written in 1842, and it's written by Charles Dickens as we get ready to embark on our holiday season. And I found out this week that the Christmas Carol was not originally intended to be written as a novella, as a story. See, Charles Dickens had been in a situation as a young boy at age 12 where he had to work in the factories in a time of England where the poor were so very poor. His dad was in debtor's prison, and he saw the harm that was being done to the very poor, and he saw this discrepancy between the very poor and the very rich, and he saw that there were so many who had terrible attitudes and stinginess in their lives. So originally, when he was older, he wanted to write a pamphlet about the laws of poverty and to make a point. And then he realized, instead of writing a pamphlet, I might write a story instead. And he develops this character named Ebenezer Scrooge, yeah? And Scrooge has sort of become this synonym, if you will, for someone who's miserly, who's stingy, who holds on, who's all about themselves, who's not generous in spirit. And if you think about that character, he had to go through the ghost of Christmas past and present and future to what? To be transformed, to see that which he had. That he, like Abram in the story in Genesis, was blessed to be a blessing. That he had abundance, and why not share it with others? Not just in money, but in time and resources and talent and words and encouragement. And we see at the end this scene of a changed man. He looks years younger, lighter. It's not by accident that the word miser is what the word miserable comes from. They go hand in hand. Giving is meant to be a rhythm in our lives. Generosity is meant to be a posture by which we choose to live. Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, where your treasure is, so is your heart. What is it that you treasure? Is it possessions? Or is it things like family, friendships, deep friendships, your faith? I was moved this week as I was with a clergy group at a conference, and one of my clergy colleagues was sharing with me that she did a funeral recently where they couldn't fit into the casket the body because the woman had so many possessions she wanted to be buried with. I don't know about you, but I don't think they're going with us wherever it is we're going. Where's your heart? Where your heart is, where your treasure. What is it that you treasure? Because that's where your heart is. On a practical level, we'll be asking for commitment cards so that we can put together a budget. Budgets are part of a business, and the church has a business side to it. We appreciate that you'll consider how it is you'll give. People say to me, well, should I tithe? Should I do gross, net? You know, they get in these really complicated formulas, and I can't give you the answer. You know your answer. Give out of your sense of generosity, whatever it is and however it is you are going to give. But give out of a sense of generosity, not this sense of holding tight and barely letting go. There was a great joke that I saw this week. There was a man who came to his pastor during stewardship campaign, and he was protesting this idea of tithing 10% of his salary. He said, when I made a little amount, I tithed 10%. He said, but now I make $750,000. I can't tithe $75,000. Is that what you're asking? And the pastor said, well, let's just stop right now. I mean, I hear your dilemma and I hear your struggle, so let's have a prayer together. And so he said, dear Lord, you know this man's struggle, so I pray you return his salary to what it was when he could tithe and be generous. Just saying. But see, Proverbs says those who are generous are blessed, not the other way around. Not those who are blessed are generous. Those who are generous are blessed. Our blessedness comes from a posture of generosity. We were made to be generous. I was thinking of several memorial services that I've done throughout my ministry. And I was thinking of sitting with a family who shared stories of their mother as we were preparing the service. And one of the children said, Mom was generous with a capital G. But I was also thinking of the other side of this coin. When I was in Boise and I served as an associate pastor at a large downtown congregation, I developed a relationship with a friend, became a friend who was the owner of one of the local funeral homes. And so we had this agreement that anytime he had a funeral that was maybe difficult or complex, that he could call upon me, because I believe everyone's life is deserving to be honored and celebrated in some way. So I get a call one day and he says, Claire, this may be the most unusual call you're ever going to get. But I have a man who wants you to do his memorial service for his mother, but he doesn't want you to say one word. Okay, that was at that time a pretty unusual request. He just wants you to go and stand by her graveside for 20 minutes and walk away. So when I met with him before the service, I just wanted to confirm that what the funeral owner had, what he said was correct. I said, I just want to make sure I'm doing what you like. I just want to know, do you really just want me to go and stand by the graveside? He said, I do. And he said, honestly, I can't come up with one word to say about my mother that's positive. He said, she lived a miserable life. Wow. I always think of that. What will be said about me at the end of my life? Was I generous in spirit? Was I generous with my gifts, my time, my resources? I have to end, and I haven't asked for permission to do so, so I'll ask for forgiveness first. But for me, since I arrived, there's one person who shows that in ways that is inspiring, and that's Ann Fort. 94 years old. She's going to get, I'm in trouble, aren't I? Just stopped skiing recently because I think the traffic on I-70 was too bad. That's why. But you know, when Anne found herself a widow, she said, God looked down on me and said, now that one, she's trouble. And Anne got to work. 17 trips, right, Anne? To Africa. When she was widowed. When I think about generosity, I think, boy, I can't complain about much. If Anne can travel all the way across the world and have children and adults call her mom because of the way she has changed their lives, I think I can add a little generosity to my life. What's your posture in life? Is it one of generosity? We're called to be generous. We are made to be generous.